Who doesn't know the products of the world-famous company Bethesda Softworks? Probably only those who have never been interested in computer games. The developer's portfolio includes such series as Doom, The Elder Scrolls, and of course, Fallout. One of the first RPGs in a post-apocalyptic setting with a deeply developed lore. A world devastated by a terrible nuclear war captured the hearts of thousands of players around the world and became a kind of classic of the genre. The themes of post-apocalypse have become so popular nowadays that instead of another game, a series was filmed. The story told in the games and the series spans several centuries of humanity's life in the post-nuclear hell. What are the main events of his life? Let's try to figure it out. Fallout, the result of corporate greed and political hysteria, a reality to which the arms race and careless treatment of resources will lead. A desert world populated by mutants and cannibals. We are trying to consider the chronology of a world that is a consequence. Of what? If this were just a game universe, it is unlikely anyone would try to find the answer to this question. However, Bethesda is known for its rare meticulousness in developing game worlds. This time, the developers chose a post-nuclear reality in America, which, before the Great War, seemed to be frozen in the 1950s. The history of the world in which the hero has to act mostly coincides with the real history of our Earth, except for some minor discrepancies in ancient times. For example, according to the fourth game in the series, the entire story began 13 to 11,000 years BC, when there was a certain precursor civilization in the current deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. Archaeologist Lorenzo Cabot, whose notes we can find in Fallout 4, claimed that an ancient city called Ubar lay beneath the sands of the Rub al-Khali. Lorenzo even organized an expedition there and eventually unearthed an ancient structure that held the remains of an extraterrestrial being. From the structure, which the archaeologist considered a temple, the scientists stole an artifact. This artifact, which resembled a crown, was worn on Cabot's head, and he eventually went insane. His story ends in an asylum. Another notable deviation from real history is the proven existence of an alien ship in Earth's orbit. According to the plot, abductions of humans for experimentation were recorded as early as 1603 AD. There are also a few other events in Fallout history unknown to the real timeline, but in any case, they are rather minor and could not have influenced the future. The fictional universe took its own path after the Americans invented and used nuclear weapons. In the Fallout world, the destruction of Hiroshima and Nagasaki really did become the reason for the end of World War II. So the first point of divergence can safely be considered the middle of August 1945. The subsequent Cold War and arms race existed in both worlds. But while in the real universe the 1960s saw a thaw, in the world of Fallout, everything happened quite differently. First of all, in 1961, it was not Yuri Gagarin, but American NASA captain Carl Bell who became the first person in space. Unfortunately, he died on re-entry, which gave the USSR and China the opportunity to dispute the plausibility of the event. The strengthening of China in this game universe begins almost immediately after World War II, while the USSR quietly fades into the background. The in-game United States finally stopped resembling the real ones in 1969, when instead of 50 states, 13 Commonwealths were formed and the national flag was changed. From then on, the Fallout universe confidently followed its self-destructive path. In a way, America froze in the 1950s. This is evident not only in external features, such as retro cars powered by atomic energy or old-fashioned televisions in the Fallout series. This kind of preservation was necessary for the political aspect of life. The anti-communist hysteria that reigned in post-war America faded away in the 1960s in real history. In the world of Fallout, it was the main driving force of technological progress. In addition, this conflict pushed the fictional world onto a path of development very different from our reality. Research into the atom and its use in all spheres of life, the development of robotics, biological weapons, and human experimentation. Despite all its rapid development, the Fallout world somehow had open knowledge of semiconductors, but didn't use them at all, and some equipment remained incredibly bulky. Apparently, the game universe did not experience either the Vietnam War or the hippie movement. Very little is known about the political and public life of the US before the Great War. Even less is known about the political enemies and allies of the states on the world stage. It is only known that the main promoter of communist ideas became China, and Europe united for a time into a single state. In 2002, the company Westtech was founded. This enterprise became the main defense partner of the government for a long time. The company conducted research in both weapons and biological warfare. In 2020, humans traveled to the moon for the last time. The first mentions of the transistor in the world Fallout appear only in 2023. Persistent rumors say this is practically the main difference between our world and the fictional one. In 2031, Vault-Tec takes over Morgantown University. By now, Vault-Tec is a powerful defense-oriented corporation, but its heyday is still ahead. At this point, government policy firmly stays on the track of the arms race, without thinking about the consequences. Mr. Handy robots by General Atomics International are introduced in 2037 as devices for construction and various auxiliary tasks. On April 2, 2042, the city of Watauga is founded in West Virginia, inhabited by robots. And on June 25th, Robert House establishes Robco Industries. America is moving toward automating most work processes. Meanwhile, John Caleb Bradburton is working on developing the recipe for Nuka-Cola, a non-alcoholic beverage with a strong stimulating effect. Nuka-Cola gains universal popularity 2 years later, when the formula was significantly improved. In 2050, amusement parks, Nuka World, Nuka Town, and Kitty Kingdom open. All of this quickly becomes very popular and belongs to Bradburton. However, the former amateur chemist is obsessed with the idea of prolonging his own life, which ultimately dooms him. By 2052, the resource wars begin. It seems the world missed the point that oil is a finite natural resource. Despite widespread atomic energy usage, the US still needs fuel and gets involved in a series of military conflicts. In April, the European Commonwealth declares war on the Middle East. The reason, naturally, is oil. The UN weekly tries to prevent the conflicts, but this ends with the organization officially ceasing to exist on July 26th. The following year, the world is struck by the new plague. In the US, it's believed to be a new biological weapon developed by China, and there is a frantic search for a vaccine. Borders are closed under quarantine, and Vault-Tec introduces a new AI system to gather information about the virus. In December 2053, terrorists use nuclear weapons to destroy the city of Tel Aviv. In 2054, to calm the panic among a population frightened by the resource wars, the Vault project is officially launched. The main developer of the program becomes Vault-Tec. The following year, Westtech continues to actively work on developing a vaccine against the new plague, and Vault-Tec transfers to them the next version of its artificial intelligence. However, this supercomputer is mainly occupied with playing chess with scientists and demonstrates remarkable intelligence. 2059. The US military increases its presence in Alaska, greatly escalating tensions between the US and Canada. In the same year, the first true artificial intelligence appears in the US, but its development is hampered by insufficient memory capacity. The fuel situation in the world becomes such that internal combustion engine cars fall out of use. Instead, the US attempts to use electric cars and atomic-powered vehicles, but resources for mass production are insufficient. Surprisingly, after the Great War, information was preserved in one of the vaults that in 2060, someone somehow managed to hold the Olympic Games. By 2063, the construction of most vaults is nearing completion. Large-scale drills begin. Despite the paranoia that has gripped the US by this point, people do not particularly rely on the vaults. Perhaps this is because the project is commercial and available to only a small part of the population? By 2066, the energy crisis leads the US to large-scale efforts to introduce thermonuclear energy into all areas of life as a primary source. But alas, deciding is not the same as doing, and the work progresses slowly, partly due to large corporations that were already beginning to suspect that the apocalypse would work in their favor. At the same time, for several years, research of a purely military nature is being conducted. Westtech is developing power armor capable of turning a soldier into a living tank. These new technologies are powered by nuclear cores. One such core can provide energy to a small city for many years. But the US is preparing for war with China. The complete depletion of oil reserves in Eurasia leads to a crisis in US-China relations. The Alaskan oil fields become a bone of contention, and in December 2066, China invades Alaska. The Canadian government tries to prevent American troops from passing through its territory. Relations between the two countries worsen even further. By 2067, WestTech has nevertheless supplied the US Army with a combat-ready version of the T-45 power armor. Although this equipment became a decisive factor in the Alaskan conflict, it had several critical flaws. Defects in the power armor were the cause of many soldiers' deaths. By 2070, the first non-military nuclear-powered cars were created. Even considering their high cost, the first models were bought up instantly. At the same time, NASA was testing hibernation capsules. In 2071, WestTech was nationalized. The corporation, now under US government control, continued work on power armor and biomedical research. WestTech began a new project called the Pan-Immunity Variant in 2073, as China ramped up attacks using biological weapons. The conflict over the last oil in Alaska squeezed resources from innocent Canada, which local residents deeply resented. Just 4 years later, WestTech obtained a strain that became known as the forced evolutionary virus. Initially, it was intended for use in agriculture to feed the country in the event of a global catastrophe. Work on the virus continued, though its direction was rather strange. Also, in 2075, the US military leadership discovered that China possessed advanced stealth technologies that America lacked. For unknown reasons, this intelligence was dismissed as rumor and ignored. At the beginning of 2076, Canada, exhausted by American troops, was finally annexed. WestTech was actively experimenting with the forced evolutionary virus, using it on dogs and other mammals. To prevent information leaks, in January, the researchers were assigned a military escort under the command of Colonel Spindle and Captain Maxon. Meanwhile, scientists infected the small Appalachian town of Huntersville with their virus. By May, it began causing mutations in humans. In June, the T-51 power armor was completed and entered mass production. This model proved so powerful that it turned the tide of the war with China. Ground operations by the PRC against the US became virtually useless from then on. However, military victories could not protect the United States from food and energy riots. The government adopted a policy of harsh suppression. New prisons were built in rebellious towns. Martial law and quarantines were imposed. In September, the first super mutants appeared in Huntersville. WestTech continued to plan human applications for its virus. A special military base was constructed to implement this goal. On October 20th, 2076, the public was introduced to Nuka-Cola Quantum, which contained the strontium-90 isotope. What are people thinking about on the brink of the end of the world? That's right, soda. In January 2077, all work on the forced evolutionary virus was moved to the Mariposa military base. The scientists were not pleased with this decision, but WestTech was entirely government and military-owned, so protests were not accepted. On January 10th, American forces fully liberated Alaska from Chinese presence. However, this victory could not affect the situation with petroleum products. Therefore, by the end of the month, power-armored soldiers began appearing in the streets of protesting cities. Knowing how the conflict with China would eventually end, the US government formed what became known as the Enclave. In the future, the Enclave would become one of the factions, serving as the definitive antagonist in all the games of the series and in the television show. The Enclave and the government hid at a secret base after experiments with the FEV virus were revealed in February 2077. Worldwide hysteria ensued, and the United States was accused of deliberately spreading the new plague. Throughout the year, America was gripped by riots against automation. In numerous clashes with workers, new types of weapons were used. These tools, prematurely demonstrated by private corporations, ultimately came under military and government jurisdiction. Amidst the chaos, Vault-Tec continued to build and equip vaults. Few knew of the major companies' plans to start a nuclear war, but even they were hunted as communists. Vault-Tec was buying up scientific developments that could lift the world out of the energy crisis. Rob co-founder Robert House entered stasis, linking his mind to a supercomputer. Ironically, his goal was to prevent nuclear bombs from falling on Las Vegas. Meanwhile, on October 10th at the Mariposa military base, Colonel Spindle and Captain Maxon discovered that West Tech scientists were experimenting on humans. The revelation drove the colonel insane, and he ultimately took his own life. Maxon began public trials of the scientists to maintain control of the situation. The interrogations, of course, ended in executions, but the mutinous soldiers were satisfied with their commander's actions. Having dealt with the scientists in 8 days, on October 20th, 2077, the de facto commander of Mariposa, Roger Maxon, officially declared his desertion from the US Army, but his message was ignored. Maxon decided to make Mariposa his fortress and ordered families moved to the base. In effect, this was the moment of the Brotherhood of Steel's origin, although the deserters were not yet aware of it. On October 22nd in Sunnyvale, the Platinum chip was printed. This item represents one of the rare examples of semiconductor technology in the Fallout universe. It was created for Mr. House, who intended to use it to protect Las Vegas from nuclear bombardment. Unfortunately, Mr. House slightly miscalculated, and the chip spent 200 years under the ruins of Sunnyvale. To be fair, even without the ultra-capable chip, Mr. House nearly succeeded in his plan and managed to deflect most of the bombs falling on his city. The Platinum chip is notable for being one of the rare transistors in the Fallout world. This item is a key quest item in the game Fallout New Vegas. On October 23rd, 2077, the war began and ended in a single day. The Great War. China and the United States unleashed their full nuclear arsenals on each other. Nuclear bombs fell everywhere. Despite the enormous destruction, many people managed to survive, but most of the US territory turned into a barren wasteland. The vault system worked as intended. Those who had secured spots hid from atomic bombardments, but they had no idea that they were now designated as test subjects for Vault-Tec experiments. The West Tech Research Center was not so lucky. Direct hits from warheads destroyed the FEV storage tanks and released the virus into the atmosphere. Under radiation exposure, the virus mutated and turned into something uncontrollable, though what exactly is still unknown. In addition to Vault-Tec vaults, some military bases and research institutes also survived. The military separatists at Mariposa were among the survivors. Possessing power armor and military equipment, this group of survivors set out to preserve pre-war technologies. By November, Maxon's significantly thinned-out team had become the Brotherhood of Steel. Equipped with the latest technology, the organization would later evolve into a medieval-style knightly order. But for now, their only concern was survival. In 2078, the world is struck by a nuclear winter. Understandably, people in protected vaults are unaware of it, but they have their own problems. Many vault overseers, following Vault-Tec's program, conduct planned experiments and have no intention of letting residents out. In October, Vault 94, populated by a peaceful religious sect, opens. The residents try to help the survivors on the surface, but in November it ends in disaster. Surface dwellers, distrusting the missionaries, kill the vault inhabitants. Additionally, in an attempt to shoot an unfamiliar device, they trigger a powerful nuclear explosion that drastically alters the landscape and leads to another wave of mutations in people and animals. In 2079, the Order of Mysteries is created. Interestingly, at first, all factions, including this specific female order, pursued noble goals. But as we know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. A year later, the consequences of the FEV virus begin to manifest actively. A wave of new mutations sweeps across the continent, producing new species literally overnight, or so it seemed to people. Who knows? The changes also affect animals, drastically increasing the danger for survivors. In 2081, on the well-protected Sierra Army Depot 6, the artificial intelligence Skynet becomes self-aware. A reference to Terminator? Undoubtedly. In December 2082, a large band of raiders blows up the Summersville Dam, flooding the city of Charleston. Since the event takes place on December 25th, it goes down in history as the Christmas Flood. The Order of Mysteries identifies the raiders as a clear and unrelenting enemy. In 2083, the city of Necropolis is founded on the ruins of Bakersfield. It is mainly populated by ghouls, a new race formed from irradiated humans. The most horrifying part of this story is that Necropolis was not founded by surface survivors. The city was built by residents of Vault 12, on whom Vault-Tec conducted one of its most inhumane experiments. People seeking refuge in Vault 12 were intentionally exposed to radiation through a specially designed vault door. Interestingly, the protagonist of the Fallout series, the Ghoul, once famous actor Cooper Howard, wanted to buy land in Bakersfield as early as 2070. His wife, a high-ranking Vault-Tec official, talked him out of it. Apparently, you can't escape fate, and the destiny meant for Vault 12 residents ultimately found Cooper on the surface. In 2086, due to betrayal by the mistress's daughter, the Order of Mysteries loses its fight with the Raiders and ceases to exist. After completing her mission, the traitor is eliminated by her new masters, which is quite logical. Meanwhile, the Enclave is plagued by internal power struggles, and the Brotherhood of Steel unites with the volunteer organization Responders in an attempt to purge Huntersville of super mutants. This mutually beneficial relationship lasts 9 years, but in 2095, conflict breaks out between the Brotherhood and the Responders. In the 2090s, Appalachia is devastated by a mutagenic virus known as the Scorched Plague. Doctors worked on a vaccine and even with some success, but the disease proved extremely contagious, and the infected incredibly dangerous. In the spring of 2098, the city of Shady Sands is founded. It was built using technologies stored in Vault 15 and intended for recolonization of the surface after nuclear bombardment. Shady Sands and the mystery of its fall play a key role in the Fallout TV series plot. For now, it is the first city not built on the ruins of war. In 2102, representatives of a trader community investigate the source of attacks on caravans. Their search leads them to the Mariposa military base, inhabited by super mutants and combat security robots. The group loses the fight, and one of its leaders falls into a vat of FEV and spends a week in it. After a series of agonizing mutations, he becomes a creature with enhanced intelligence and strange philosophy. He eventually becomes the Master, leader of the super mutants, and a new faction called Unity emerges in the post-nuclear world. This process continues for nearly 30 years, until 2130. On October 23rd, residents of Vault 76 emerge to the surface. They complete projects to fight the Scorched Plague, initiated by locals. A year later, they kill the Scorchbeast Queen and purge the region of the Scorched. From 2126 to 2128, the trading community known as the Hub is gripped by wars between rival clans. In essence, it's just a turf war. The conflict is resolved by a character named Roy Green. Starting in 2131, the former human and now leader of super mutants, the Master, organizes raids on trading caravans. The abducted are meant to serve as raw material for building a super mutant army, though many cannot survive the transformation. Unity's forces steadily grow. People overlook the problem, thinking the raids are just the work of wild mutants. By 2150, Unity gradually evolves into a religious cult, the Children of the Cathedral. Some cultists join the Master, and their leader, Morpheus, becomes the public face of the organization. At this time, the Brotherhood of Steel is waging wars against raiders. In 2155, a caravan from vault dwellers in Los Angeles is captured by Unity. This vault was used by Vault-Tec before the Great War for promotional purposes. It was fully equipped, which allowed its residents to survive the nuclear bombardment. From this moment, the Master moves into the vault beneath the cathedral and integrates his brain with the bunker's computer. This act likely pushes him to declare himself a god. In December 2161, a person is sent from Vault 13 to find a new water chip. This marks the beginning of the first Fallout game, wandering the wasteland in search of the chip. The protagonist disrupts Unity's plans for world domination. He kills the Master and destroys the Mariposa military base, the main facility for super mutant production. All this takes less than a year. By March 3rd, 2162, the Master is defeated. Unfortunately, Vault 13 does not appreciate the hero's deed and exiles him to the surface. The Brotherhood of Steel finishes off the remnants of Unity's army, eliminating the threat to the region. In 2186, Shady Sands forms a provisional government of the New California Republic. Its goal is to draft a constitution, Surface dwellers are striving to return to a normal life resembling the pre-war era. In 2205, laws protecting the rights of ghouls and super mutants appear in New California. The country's progressive government seeks to assimilate these new intelligent life forms into the societal structure as much as possible. In 2220, after a series of major failures, Enclave scientists finally create a working prototype of the new Mark II power armor. The preceding deadly test trials are classified. The truth might severely damage the morale of President Richardson's subordinates. In 2236, Enclave scouts managed to discover the remains of the Mariposa military base, using the slave labor of captured wastelanders and super mutants. The Enclave conducts excavations at the site. The goal is to find the forced evolutionary virus, FEV, and continue studying its effects on living beings and humans. In 2241, the events of the second game begin. The protagonist is the grandchild of the character from the first game. While he prepares for a trial in his town of Arroyo, the Enclave tricks Vault 13 into opening. The purpose is unclear, but nearly all the residents of Vault 13 are kidnapped. To secure the area, the Enclave releases mutated intelligent reptiles into Vault 13 and its surroundings. The following year, the Enclave attacks the protagonist's home settlement, enslaving its people. This proves to be a mistake. The protagonist infiltrates the Enclave base, destroys it, kills the president, and halts the Enclave's attempts to seize global power. New California, by contrast, attracts more and more allies and steadily expands. After all, humanity's desire to return to the lifestyle of pre-war generations is indomitable. Besides, the wasteland is still home to people and ghouls who were already adults when the Great War happened. How they've lived this long, no one knows. 2255. The Brotherhood of Steel establishes the Citadel on the ruins of the Pentagon. This location is intended to become the Brotherhood's main operational base. Their interest in the capital wasteland is driven by the search for pre-war technology. In the process, however, Brotherhood squads also deal with raiders and slavers. 2258, the protagonist of Fallout 3 is born. Unfortunately, his mother dies during childbirth, and his father refuses to continue working on an important scientific project. In 2274, Mr. House launches the reconstruction of New Vegas. At one point, his interests clash with those of the New California Republic. This could have led to a major bloodbath, but the matter is resolved through negotiations. As a result, New Vegas and the NCR received the desperately needed electricity produced by the Hoover Dam. In 2277, 200 years after the Great War, the Lone Wanderer, the protagonist of the third game, sets out in search of his father. The scientist who left the vault ultimately dies while trying to complete Project Purity. This research aimed to create a reliable water purifier for the contaminated reservoir in the capital wasteland. Had Project Purity succeeded, the capital wasteland would have had an unlimited supply of clean drinking water. Naturally, the local enclave found this outcome entirely unacceptable. The Lone Wanderer refuses, although he may choose not to, the enclave's demand to sabotage the purifier. In any case, what the Lone Wanderer doesn't finish, the Brotherhood of Steel completes. After losing the war for the future, no one gives a damn about the enclave. In 2281, Robert House, having spent a fantastic amount of money, finally finds the platinum chip. This marks the beginning of Fallout New Vegas. A courier, the player's protagonist, is ambushed in Good Springs. He's attacked by a group of Mojave Desert nomads. Most intriguingly, one of them, Benny, is an employee of Mr. House himself. The courier is shot in the head twice, and no one bothers to make sure he's dead. They simply dump him into a grave at the local cemetery. That's where Victor, a semi-autonomous robot and one of those who helped Mr. House search for the platinum chip, finds him. The robot couldn't help during the ambush, but he digs the courier out and takes him to a doctor. Dr. Mitchell heals the courier, thus begins the story of the platinum chip delivery. The courier's adventures unfold against the backdrop of the conflict between the NCR and Caesar's Legion, a faction modeled after ancient Rome. The attempt to deliver the platinum chip continues into the next year. Several possible endings exist in the game, but in any case, the Mojave Desert is changed forever. In 2283, Arthur Maxon manages to unite the fractured parts of the Brotherhood of Steel and becomes Commander-in-Chief. On October 23, 2287, the sole survivor emerges from cryosleep in Vault 111. This person is the protagonist of the fourth game in the Fallout series. A strange error occurs in the vault's life support system, which causes the character to exit stasis. Once, he had been one of those unfortunate people tricked into entering the vault and placed into suspended animation. According to Vault-Tec's plan, this vault was conducting an experiment in human cryopreservation. Among those accidentally placed in hibernation was the protagonist's son, born before the Great War. In search of his pure DNA, agents of the Institute infiltrated Vault 111 in 2227. They killed the remaining staff and the child's mother. Afterward, they sabotaged the life support systems of all the cryo chambers except one. This is how the protagonist became the sole survivor. Upon awakening, he sets out in search of the child stolen by Institute agents. Of course, he does not know that the Institute is now led by his kidnapped son. Nor does he know that his son is the reason he woke up. All this takes place on the East Coast, in a region called the Commonwealth. Sadly, after escaping one war 210 years ago, the sole survivor finds himself in another. Thankfully, not a nuclear one. A large-scale conflict erupts in the Commonwealth, involving 4 powerful factions. Naturally, the main point of contention is control of the region. Which side the protagonist joins is up to the player. One thing is certain. No matter what, difficult missions and long adventures await. And what about the world? The world is still plunged into chaos, but something new is developing on the ruins. And it's not just the 2291 forecasts about food shortages due to overpopulation in New California. In reality, the universe has long since outgrown the computer screen. In the real world, on April 10, 2024, the first season of the Fallout TV series was released, which essentially complements the fictional universe's timeline. At the end of 2296, a young resident of Vault 33 is preparing to marry a neighbor from Vault 32. The 3 vaults, numbered 31, 32, and 33, are connected by a shared computer network, personnel exchange, resources, and administration. These vaults probably resemble vivariums the least. Here, a relatively civilized social experiment is being conducted. People seem happy and a bit naive. As the main character later says, the worst thing someone can do to you in Vault 33 is not thank you for something. Nevertheless, raiders from the surface break into this idyllic territory. And although the wedding turns into something of a bloodbath, the bandits' goal is not murder or robbery. They kidnap the overseer and their leader suggests the heroine stop by the surface sometime, after which the attackers leave. Possessing a freedom-loving spirit and persistent character, the overseer's daughter, Lucy, yes, the bride, sets out to find her father. Her brother, citing cowardice, stays behind. But the big question is, which of the overseer's children is braver? Meanwhile, also in 2296, an unremarkable Enclave scientist named Ziggy Wilzig is forced to flee the laboratory where he worked. Caught over a trife, a hidden dog, Wilzig feared the exposure of his greatest secret. He had discovered cold fusion technology, which could have changed this broken world forever. Did he know that this discovery might have prevented the Great War and the horrible world he now lived in? Did he realize that Vault-Tec had deliberately brought up such developments to hide them from the public? He probably wasn't interested in a 200-year-old story, but Ziggy realized the Enclave would never use this unique technology for the benefit of the people living on this ravaged land. Apparently, Wilzig was exposed. News that he carried something extremely valuable quickly spread, both to the Brotherhood of Steel and to his home institution. The wasteland filled with wanted posters of Ziggy and his dog. A good bounty was offered for the runaway scientist. That bounty prompts some not-so-bright bandits to dig up an ancient ghoul from a grave. In the series, he's simply called the Ghoul. But in reality, memories of pre-war life still burn inside the hardened soul of Cooper Howard. 220 years ago, he was a famous Western movie actor. Now he looks like a caricature cowboy in museum rags. The Brotherhood of Steel also launches a mission to chase the unlucky scientist. A young squire is forced to pose as a knight, since his superior died due to his own stupidity. The main characters' paths soon cross. However, instead of Ziggy Wilzig, after a well-aimed shot by the ghoul, all that remains is a very valuable head. And while it becomes a point of competition on the surface, Norm MacLean, Lucy's brother, uncovers oddities in the vault and begins an investigation. One way or another, the path leads the heroes to Lee Moldaver. Before the war, she was a scientist, the one who originally discovered the now famous cold fusion. How she managed to survive and remain human is not clarified in the series. Each takes their own route. Lucy, the ghoul, and Maximus from the Brotherhood of Steel arrive at Moldaver. Each faces a surprise here. Each makes a difficult moral choice, and each finds important clarifications regarding their own memories. And we learn that the thriving Shady Sands was destroyed by a nuclear strike in 2277. The one who carried it out was the heroine's father, on the orders of the leadership, the same leadership into whose trap his son would fall 20 years later. This story will definitely have a continuation, and we will probably find out what choice each of the characters ultimately makes. Starting in 2301, Mr. House, if of course he hasn't been destroyed by the protagonist, intends to develop or restore advanced technologies in his controlled territory. He gives himself 30 years to resume space flights. That's logical considering people had flown to the moon even before the Great War. 2377. According to the calculations of the Vault creators, the United States will once again be 100% habitable by this year. Just some 300 years of strange experiments. Mr. House has no interest in a world crippled by nuclear war. He yearns for the stars. In 2381, he plans to send ships into deep space to colonize new worlds. If anyone gets the idea to never leave the vault, too bad. According to Vault Tech, their bunkers are suitable for habitation only until 2997. After that, the equipment will shut down and become inoperative. Perhaps they will still serve those who learn nothing from the experience of their ancestors, and people may have to use them again. Once, maybe twice more. Who will emerge 300 years from now, or 600? And will they still be human? This is where the timeline of the Fallout world currently ends, but who knows? Perhaps the developers will come up with new expansions because the series has many fans. Humans are always eager to imagine what comes after a global catastrophe, whatever it may be. Curiosity gives rise to the most bizarre worlds, which gradually begin to live lives of their own, and we watch them, fascinated. And that's all from me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon. Your engagement is the best reward I could ask for. Thanks for watching, see you soon, bye.